Okay, the chapter after Exodus is Ned Leaves Home. This may be the last chapter I read for today. I'm trying to see where book 3 is. Well, let me see. 1, 2, 3. I might do one more. Let's get through Ned Leaves Home. So, Ned Leaves Home, page 75. Some colored soldiers from the war organized a committee to go around and see how the colored people was treated. They went all over the state, checking on how the colored was living. Ned found out about the committee and joined it. He reported on the parish where we lived. He told the committee the work we did, how long we had to work, how much money we got for working, how much we had to pay for food and clothes, how the overseer treated us in the field. When the committee found out the colored was treated no better than they was treated in slavery, they told Ned to leave for the North. Ned's job was to tell people how to get to New Orleans, how to travel, where they could stop, where they could find help and food. Ned was 17 or 18 then. I'm sure he wasn't 20 yet. Tall, slim, nothing but arms and legs. Very quiet, always serious. Too serious. I didn't like to see him serious like that. I used to always ask him, Ned, what are you thinking about? He would say, nothing. But I knowed he was thinking about his mama. He never said it. He never talked about her. He used to call me mama. But I knowed he was thinking about her all the time. I would do anything so he could keep his mind off her. I would make him talk about school. He liked his first teacher, the young colored man who was here when we first came to the place. We used to talk about him long after he had gone. I would make him talk about the other children in the quarters. So the quarters are one-room buildings, and they were all lined up evenly, and it's where the freed slaves would live. So during slavery times, it was where the slaves lived. So there's a fireplace, and that's it. Remember, she describes it. The bed is nailed to the wall, right? And so then she had to get people to make things. So that's what the quarters are. Now I've got to figure out where I was. Make him talk about anything to keep him from thinking so much. But he was a serious child. Even if this terrible thing hadn't happened to his mom or his little sister, he still would have been a serious person. He had a pretty little smile, though. He was real black, with dimples in his jaws. And he had the whitest teeth you ever saw. Real handsome when he wasn't serious. Tall, slim, handsome black child. He got heavy when he got older. He got to be 200 pounds or better. But he was nothing but arms and legs when he was growing up, right? So it's like the normal development of men and women. And so, he's super thin because he's really young still. He had changed his name now, Ned Douglas. Before he was Ned Brown after me. We didn't know his daddy's name, so he was Ned Brown. Then he changed it to Douglas after Mr. Frederick Douglass. He was Ned Douglas a while, then he was Ned Stephen Douglas. Ned Stephen Douglas a while, then he was Edward Stephen Douglas. All the rest of the young men around him was taking on names like that. Some Douglas, some Brown, after John Brown, not Jane Brown. Some Turners after Nat Turner. Summers, some Sherman. Ask one his name right off, he would tell you John Brown. Ask him his daddy's name, he'd say Ed Washington. The old people used to laugh and shake their heads, but these children were serious. I used to tell Ned all the time he was too serious. He had learned to read and he could write. He always had some kind of book around the house. When the old masters came back from Washington to stop the colored people from leaving the South, they started watching people like Ned. They knowed about the committee. They knowed he was a member. And now they was watching him. Colonel Dye called me to the house one day and told me to make him stop. I told him I would talk to Ned. He told me don't just talk, make him stop, or he was going to get himself in a lot of trouble. I told Ned, but he said he wouldn't stop. One night, while he was out doing work for the committee, They came riding. So they is like the secret groups, right? The KKK. My cabin was way down in the quarters, and they passed all the other cabins to come to mine. It was in the winter, and it was a full moon, and it had plenty of stars. And they came on horses, 8 or 9 of them. I didn't know they was out there till they'd kicked the door in. All had on their sheets. 3 of them came in, the others stayed out. I could see them out there on their horses. "Where's he at?" one of them asked. "Who?" I asked. He slapped me down with the back of his hand right across the face. Then they turned over everything in the house, turned over my table, kicked the bench in the fire. The end of it got scorched, and when they left, I had to douse it out with water. "You still don't know where he's at?" the same one asked. No, I was getting up. He waited till I got up, and then he slapped me back down. "Still don't?" he said. "She don't know, Bo," another one said. "She know," Bo said. "Let her be, Bo," the other one said. "We'll get him some other time. Let's get out of here." They got on their horses and went back up the quarters. They had to pass by the big house, so the people in the house must have heard them. I wouldn't have been a bit surprised if Colonel Dye hadn't sent them himself. Late that night, Ned came back to the house. My face was swollen. He asked me what happened. I told him. He told me to pack. We was leaving now. We could take to the swamps till we got off that place. We could take the road to New Orleans. In New Orleans, we'd take a boat for Kansas. "I can't go with you," I said. "You gotta," he said. "They came here and beat you this time. They'll do worse when they come back." "They won't do me nothing," I said. "If I stop," he said, "you want me to stop too?" "I want you to do what you think is right," I said. "I'm doing what I think is right," he said. "Then you have to go, or they'll kill you. You have to go with me." "No," I said. "You ain't married at this place," he said. "In a way," I said. "I can't stop, Mama," he said. "Then you have to go." I sat on the bench in front of the fire half and pulled Ned down beside me. I looked in his face, and he was already crying. "This is not my time," I said. "After the war wasn't my time," he said. "But I went everywhere you wanted me to go." "People don't keep moving, Ned. They move when they're slaves," he said. "What's up there?" I asked him. "Everybody else is going," he said. "Many are going, but not everybody," I said. "I think you ought to go, but not me." "Just leave you here to be a dog?" he said. "I won't be a dog," I said. "You'll be a dog," he said, "to eat the crumbs they throw on the floor." "I won't eat crumbs, Ned. And I won't eat off the floor," I said. "You know better than that." "I don't mean it like that," he said. "I mean, they're making us separate, and I don't want us to separate." "It had to happen one day," I told him. "I told you that when we first started." "You want me to give it up?" "Not unless you want to," I said. "Things like this you got to make up in your own mind." He sat there squeezing my hands and crying. I pulled him close and held him to my bosom. "You ought to go," I said. "They might come back tonight." "I ought to give it up," he said. "How you going to live?" "I'll make out," I said. "I can't give it up," he said. "I ought to stay here and just let them kill me." "I want you to go. They will kill you if you stay." I had already cooked up his grub, and while he sat on the bench eating, I packed the rest for him to take. All the time I was packing his things, I kept from looking at him. I know if I had looked at him, he would have seen how I felt, and he wouldn't have been able to go. I didn't want him to go. God knows I didn't want him to go. But I know he had to leave one day, so why not now? When I had packed his food and clothes, I put the sack by the door. Ned took a long time to finish eating. I did everything to keep from looking at him. When he got up to go, my heart jumped in my chest, but I forced myself to go up to him. "We doing what we both think is best," I said. He held me close. He was tall and thin. I could feel him crying, but I held up till he was gone. I stood in the door and watched him till he had gone out of the quarters. Then I went back inside and I lay down on the bed and I cried all night. I'm going to read another chapter. So finish this one and do your journaling. So in this chapter, some of the things that you could journal is why the secret groups want Ned to be quiet. He's like an activist, right? He's like an activist for Blacks. And why, one of the important things here is, why does Jane feel it's not her time? Like, she's not old like me. I think she's like 25, 26, maybe 30. And so why would she feel like it's not her time? And you have to think back to the story. Remember, she did a lot of traveling to try to get to Ohio. And now when she has a chance to leave Louisiana and leave with Ned, who can read a map and knows where these places are, why doesn't she go? I want you to think about that. Another thing that you could journal, if those don't interest you, is how you felt when somebody had to leave you. They could have left you because they were dying. They could have left you for a job. They could have left you for a better life. And how did that make you feel? And maybe even think about, how does it make you feel when you get to see these people too? All right. So those would be some good ideas that you could use for journaling. I'll see you in